So let's go back in time here to what happened less than 24 hours ago. We have a speeding pickup truck coming up Canal Street toward the lake, then turning onto Bourbon, barreling past the police barricades and into a crowd of people who were celebrating the new year and were anticipating the Sugar Bowl game tonight. Instead, 15 died and nearly 24 were injured. You could see it on the faces of survivors, the disbelief and the horror. After the pickup plowed into the crowd, the driver jumped out of the truck with a rifle and fired on police. 2 NOPD officers returned fire, and although they were wounded, they killed him. But that was just the start of the story. Congressman Troy Carter was briefed by federal law enforcement. There were at least 2 explosive devices in the city, one in Jackson Square.
It was apparently an ice chest that was unattended. And kudos to law enforcement for being experts at what they do to identify these things and were able to disarm them.
Back on Bourbon Street, FBI agents collected evidence from the scene. The FBI said there was an ISIS flag and more explosive devices in the pickup. With the suspect dead, the search for those 4 accomplices will be critical. A law enforcement source tells ABC that there are 3 men and 1 woman.
We expect to put the full force and resources of the federal government behind this investigation.
Much of the outrage over what happened here last night centers on how did that pickup driver get around all the barricades on Bourbon Street to plow into those people? How was he able to do that? Kurt, I'll be back with that report, that angle on the story in just a few minutes.
See you in a moment. Let's go back to Susan Roshan in the French Quarter with that. Susan.
Kurt, that's one of the big questions here. And both the city and the NOPD are on the defensive about what was on Bourbon Street and what was missing. Nearly 8 years ago, city leaders announced that 5 sets of these retractable bollards, steel pipes to block off traffic, would be installed at cross streets all along Bourbon because of the very thing that's now happened.
We see large concentrations of pedestrians in the French Quarter, specifically on Bourbon Street. It offers what we believe to be sort of an iconic or symbolic target. And so we want to make sure that we're hardening infrastructure where appropriate.
But not all the bollards were installed, and the set at Iberville malfunctioned, a fact that the city and law enforcement knew.
Bollards were not up because they are near completion, with the expectation of being completed, of course, by Super Bowl.
That's right. The problem was not intended to be fixed by the city until the Super Bowl.
So we have been aware of the bollard situation for a long time, and we did indeed harden those target areas where the bollards are. We have patrol cars out there as a hard target, as well as with barriers. This particular terrorist drove around onto the sidewalk and got around the hard target. Let's say we put the wedge up and it got stuck. There is no way that ambulance could get in or out. People couldn't get in and out. So we knew that these were malfunction. So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorist defeated it.
So critics are saying maybe the plan should be different, should have been different. Instead of a squad car trying to block off Bourbon Street, why not something heavier and bigger and wide enough to block that pickup driver from going around and up onto the sidewalk? Needless to say, Kurt, people here are traumatized. WGNO's Jordan Lippincott talked to a tourist from Alabama who watched what happened.